Okay, so Andy Riggs, Vice Chair of the Negotiating Committee. I'm going to start working on Section 5. When I get tired or worn out, Steve Radican will take over, or if the questions get hard too. So my background, I came from the System Scheduling Committee back in April, so that's where I came from. Okay, so Section 5, hours of service. This is where a lot of our flight time, duty time rules, those things come into play. Some of the trip rigs. A lot. You'll notice what you saw with LCPs already is some of these things span 2 contract sections. So if we say we'll get to that later, we really will. We're not just pushing it off. But in Section 5, we're going to cover some reserve aspects, some line holder aspects as well. Okay, so LPA during involuntary furloughs today, that window is 74 hours to 82 hours. We changed that to 72 hours to a maximum of 79 hours. So that's an improvement there. I'll try not to talk too fast. One, it makes the material, I get through this faster. But also I'm a little bit more familiar with it. So I'm going to try and go through it quick. But if it's too fast, let me know. Reserve pilot data deviation. This is an improvement here for our reserve pilots. Crud. Thank you, Becky. There's, okay, there we go. Sorry, a little bit of a delay. There we go. Okay, deadheading on a single pilot aircraft. One of the things that we have an opportunity when we're negotiating a contract that's supposed to be a living document and move forward with us are tackling items that, 10, 12 years ago we didn't think about. This is one of them. The fact that in the future, there could be airlines out there that are pursuing single pilot aircraft. That's not happening here. We have contractual language that prevents that. But if the company looks to deadhead us on an offline partner, somebody over in Europe, something of that nature, we at least got our foot in the door here with contractual language that they have to meet and discuss with us deadheading on a single pilot aircraft in the event that it becomes certified under the FAA. One quick point, and the pilot lawyers can back me up if I need it. But meet and discuss, a lot of people think that that's weak language. When they hear that meet and discuss, they think it means a company walks in, says this is how it's going to be, and we can swallow it or not, but that's how it's going to be. Meet and discuss actually has some legal background to it and means something more than just they can jam it down our throats. Okay, so it wasn't the company may. If it was a company may, it would say the company may require us to deadhead on single pilot aircraft. Okay. A reserve pilot deadhead deviation. This is something that affects our reserve pilots. Today, the contract says that when you deviate as a reserve, that your trip can be modified to show you on the first available deadhead flight back to base. Oftentimes that may eliminate a layover. It's going to put you back in FIFO order quicker. And for our pilots that live in base or pilots that commute, it may mean the difference that if your trip ends in San Fran and you're Newark base, you may not be able to actually get home to Orlando or Chicago or whatever before you go back on call, and you could be caught in a bad situation where you're not in position. This changes that going forward, that your time back in base, your time back in the hopper to be back on reserve, it's going to be based on original trip end time. Hotel and transportation for deviating pilots. This codifies something that's partly in practice today, but going forward, it's codified in the agreement that original hotel and transportation will be available to the deviating pilots. Today, the hotel wasn't so big of a deal getting that, but the transportation. This does not mean that the company will schedule multiple Golden Touch limos into Manhattan for you, but it means that if your scheduled deadhead in from Houston into New York was supposed to land at 10 a.m. and you decide to go in from Kansas City and you land at 9:30, there should still be a van there for you at 10 a.m. to go on into the city, and that's covered by the company. Limitations on use of the 777 high density, aka cattle car cabin rest seat. It's limited. Dang it. There we go. Okay. This thing has like a slow delay. It's had a stroke. Okay, unaugmented duty limit. 5E1 alpha. In addition to the table limit minus 30 minutes, that's what's in play today. Hard limit at table B minus 30 minutes. It also cannot exceed 13 hours. So this is a little bit of a belt and suspenders. We've added the 13-hour limit to that. Today, anytime you report between 7 a.m. and 11:59, your duty period could be 13:30. So quick math, we got an additional 30 minutes off of that maximum duty day limitation. All right, now to the cattle car seat. Cabin rest seat on the 777 HD, it's limited to use on a single augmented flight and a duty period of 1320. Today, the limit's 1420, so we're just taking it down an hour from that. These are primarily in use well, Hawaii's going more 787 from here. But in a number of our markets, the cattle car 777 is used for mainland to Hawaii flights. So that's to limit those duty days. They are deploying them a little bit to Europe nowadays, but this limits that by an extra hour. Any future in-flight premium product seat that's smaller than the current seat in use on those is limited to the FAR 117 limit for unaugmented. So while table C would normally be what you would use, table B, which is much more restrictive, would be in use there. Basic single augmented duty limit with a class 3 rest facility. So the reserve availability period, so the RAP, the time spent on short call, plus the duty time, the time that you're actually reporting for duty, cannot be scheduled, including reassignments over 17 hours for single augmented on class 3 facility aircraft. This is really to combat a reserve being called to the airport to fly a transcon turn that's augmented. So it's very rare today that they will do a transcon turn on an aircraft. Number one, 737 doesn't have a approved rest facility, neither the 757-300 or the Airbus today. But occasionally they will look at staffing, they come up short and they go, let's add a pilot and we'll run that as a transcon turn. It's already tight today. There's a short window in which they can do that. But what this prevents is calling a reserve who's already been on call for 2, 3, 4 hours and them showing up with the crew, having a different duty day, a much longer duty day. It locks them in that really, they have about an hour and a half here if you're on short call to assign you to one of these. And after that, you're unable to do that kind of flying. New co-terminals. This just codifies how we determine what a co-terminal is, that they can use this if the drive time between the terminals is 90 minutes. This is Tampa, right? Yeah, this is Tampa for the Orlando base. This is really what this is the pathway for the new Tampa base. I'm sorry, the new Orlando base. Template, sorry. Tampa is allowed in under this agreement. And this is a template going forward that if we were to, I mean, our current cities today, we don't fly to any other cities and the close locale that they would, I guess if they had a Gary here or something. Yeah, it might, that's scary. But that's what that would be. It's just a template going forward. Okay, deadhead, a conclusion of a global trip. So this is modified for global trips that only have a deadhead as the last leg in the trip. It's a minimum of 12 hours rest required prior to the deadhead. And what that means today, you have a minimum of 18 hours scheduled, 16 hours in the actual operation before you can continue on back to your base. But the idea here is for the pilot, what we see most frequently is pilots deviate from that because they say, I'm in Boston at the end of a W or something, I'm in DC, I just want to get home, so I'm going to head on home. This allows them for the pilot to get home earlier. But what this prevents is if they change their mind or something and they want to have you operate, then you'd better have an 18-hour layover in order to do that. They can't say, 12 hours, here's your deadhead, you show up at the airport to deadhead, here's some flying instead. They can't do that. Unless you've had an 18-hour layover, you're done at that point. Rest when changing bases. This is, we call it a modification because it's something that is in practice today, but we needed to codify it going forward. This has to do when a pilot change bases when you're lateral to a different base. If you're San Fran as a new hire and you're finally able to hold Denver, how it's handled when you're going from one base to another. A couple of things that we got to take care of, make sure our pilots are able to be in position and rested and in compliance with the UPA and the FARs. We also want to protect that pilot to make sure that they aren't incurring additional expenses that they shouldn't because the companies move them when they're not prepared. So it codifies the rest, the time off. If you're staying within the same time zone, so LA to San Fran or including Vegas, okay, everyone knows how the time zones work. 10 hours is the minimum there. So the amount of time, the flight to get to that new base plus 10 hours rest, that gets you your FAR minimum rest there for your next base. And if you're changing bases, 30 hours is used. That's for two reasons. One is an FAR reason to reset your local base time clock for 3168 calculations. Also because the company's 1970s systems struggle. So this is one of those things where the struggle is built in, and it's been to the pilot's benefit there. This restriction is applies to PBS and trip trading as well. So going forward, those pilots will ensure that they have either, the time off built in. They're not going to be able to build conflicts in and get trips dropped for this. The trip trade system and PBS will be aware of this restriction and make sure that you're scheduled properly under the FARs and UPA. Okay, reserve days off. Okay, so this is an improvement. First off, out of the gate, in polling data and surveys, our pilots spoke loud and clear that can you guys hear me okay? Okay, keep moving away. Our pilots spoke loud and clear that they wanted quality of life. This is a quality of life contract. Pilots wanted more time off. And part of that for our reserves is time off that's protected. Because it does no good if you get a bunch of days off of work at the beginning of the bid period and then you're running through them, can't make doctor's appointments, time with your family, things like that. So one of the best things we went after, I say best, a day off, it's hard to quantify what that's worth, but an extra day off is one less day the company can touch you. So that's what we went after, was additional time off for our reserves. Initially, and this is, you don't need to go and share this sermon in the crew room, so I'm just giving you the background, okay? So initially, the company said, we'll go for the additional day off, but you have to let us know. We're going to let you bid it 1 year at a time, and you're stuck with it. So you better be sure if you want the additional day off or you want the regular day of work. Oh, and by the way, we're going to charge you for that additional day off. That's going to come off your MPG. We said, absolutely not. That's not an additional day off. We're paying for that. We see right through that scam. Also, the idea that a year in advance you need to know what you want to do. Some months everybody may be busy at home, you got nothing going on, I'll work the extra day, get paid for it. Other months you say the time off is important to me. So the idea that this company who struggles through many processes can sharpshoot and know exactly what they need as far as pilot staffing was kind of laughable. So we pushed back on that. Where we smoked them out basically. So what we said was, no, we want the additional day. The pilots aren't going to pay for it. And if you have a problem, you need to articulate what that is. And we knew what it was, the staffing in the summer. This airline flies, the airline makes their money in June, July, August, and December primarily. So we can't do the additional day off in those months. Said, okay, we're not paying for the additional day off in the other 8 months. And that's where we are in here. So we got normal years and leap years. Mention leap year because next year is a leap year. So traditional reserve, and you'll get used to hearing these terms. Traditional reserve will continue to have 12 days off, 18 days of work in June, July, August, and December. They'll have 13 days off in the 30-day months of March, April, May. And in the 31-day bid periods, they'll have 14 days off. That will be standard. And because MPG is increasing to 417.39, regular reserve MPG will remain at 73 hours. So it's not a scam. You're not paying for that extra day. Every month you will have, let me just rephrase that. In June, July, and August, you'll get an MPG of 77 hours and 17 minutes and 39 seconds. You'll be compensated for that additional day that you're working over normal. And the other months, you'll have that additional day off and you'll be compensated as 73 hours for that. In the leap years, the month of April floats between the 13-day off and the 14-day off. That's the only change there. You have to account for the extra day somewhere. Okay, so the other flavor of reserve, and we'll get into these, voluntary early check and voluntary short call reserves. These are purely voluntary. It's always what the V stands for. No one can be forced into this. But those pilots take on additional responsibility of the company, being available before 10 a.m., being uncapped as far as short calls. They're saying primarily, I'm available. They receive additional compensation in MPG and ad pay for that. They also have the ability to bid for an additional day off in the bid period and be guaranteed that additional day off. That does come off of their MPG. We'll show you a chart later, though, that demonstrates with the other ad pays and MPGs that are afforded to them by which process they choose, that they're still being paid more than 73 hours. So it is funded out of their MPG, but they're not going down to like a 68-hour line for that. So those pilots, we shift everything. So in the summer months in December, a VEC or a VSU elects for the additional day off. We'll have 13 days off. In the remaining 30-day bid periods, they'll go to 14. And in the 5 or 6 months a year, depending on the leap year, that it's a 31-day bid period, they'll have 15 days off. 15 days off, 16 days of reserve. And this is probably everything I just covered. Okay, so yeah, entitled pick up the extra day. Oh, this is a different one, sorry. We also have, so that's additional days off. We also negotiate for the pilot, excuse me, who says, hey, I want to work the additional day. If the published LPA in a category is above 77, you can pick up an additional day of work. It may be done in PBS, it may be done post PBS as well. And that is going to give you an additional 417.39 for that. If they don't make the election PBS after with company concurrence, you can assign it post PBS. Elimination of flexible day off in global reserve categories. Flexible day off today is a day off that can only be a day off that exists on a global pilot schedule that can only be disrupted for the assignment of a global trip. So if you are a Newark 777, they cannot roll your day off for, I said triple, Newark 76. They cannot roll your day off for the assignment of a Honolulu trip because Newark Honolulu is a basic trip, can't disrupt the FDO for that. They can disrupt the FDO to go to Athens or something like that. So the elimination of the FDO for global reserves. RDO could be used for global, FDO is not going to close that. Yes, sorry. Thanks, Sean. Thanks for the shake. So the elimination of the FDO for global reserves means that a global reserve cannot have any of their days off disrupted for a basic trip. A lot of our global fleets are flying domestic flying these days. So that means that you're not going to have your days off rolled to do that transcon to the West Coast or the Cancun turn or something like that. One thing that isn't covered in here, but I know people are thinking about this with the Airbus coming online. What happens when they drop an Airbus into New York or DC and it starts doing Shannon flying and now your category is global? What does that do to you? This is actually to your advantage. This portion of it is to your advantage because you will not have an FDO. And so the vast majority of flying in that category is going to be basic. And now they've lost the ability to reassign you into your FDO. Basic FDO assignments. An FDO assignment can only be for a 2-day trip. So this is a big change. Today, if you're on reserve, say you're on reserve Monday through Friday, and they call you on Wednesday to assign you a 4-day trip today, so disrupting your FDO on Saturday, that's perfectly legal today. It's very frustrating to our reserves because they say, hey, you've known 4 days in advance that you need to burn me on Saturday. You could split this trip. You could give it to somebody else. Why are you rolling my day off? This is something that we attacked with contractual language, and the company agreed to only disrupt an FDO for the assignment of a 2-day trip. So that means any Denver pilots here? Okay, Denver 756. This is one that we went after. 756, the 3-day Hawaii trips. We thought for sure they'd try and carve this out. They did not carve this out. So that means those Denver 3-day trips, that's a basic trip. So if they assign you to go to La Hui on Thursday and Friday is your FDO, they can do that, but they will have to fly you to La Hui on Thursday and deadhead you back through LA or San Fran on Friday. And they're gonna have to split that trip. It's gonna get really expensive. But our time off is valuable, and that's what this establishes. So at pilot request, the company shall replace the pilot as they pass through their base, and if there's an unassigned reserve available to complete that flying. So if they have disrupted your day off, the pilot can request it. And we say that because you may elect not to do that. The reassignment ad pay and everything stacking up may be to your advantage. Maybe you didn't have plans. You say, leave me on it. This is a money trip. We didn't want to take that away from the pilot's ability, but this is a pilot may request. The pilot can initiate that to get off that trip if there's an unassigned reserve that can complete that flying. If the pilot selects that option to come off the trip, they will not be eligible for day off restoration, but they will be entitled to roll day off pay for that. And that roll day off pay is 5 hours and 15 minutes of ad pay. Okay, global HGO schedule option. This is an improvement for our global pilots. Today, a global pilot can bid a single block of HGOs, and that's their only block today that they can really plan on making activities, appointments, things of that nature. We secured the ability to bid. You can continue to bid a single block of 6 HGOs if you prefer, or you can bid 2 blocks. And we cover there what the blocks can look like: 2 blocks of 3, a block of 4, and a block of 2. And if you can't bid for either of those, or if you don't bid for either of those, you'll at least get the block of 6. The block of 6 is the default, in other words. Schedules cannot have more than 4 blocks of days off. That's the same as today. And all remaining days off in the bid period will be RDOs. We covered that. All that is to say is there's no FDO for Global Pilot. The pilot has the option to allow for an HGO block with an intervening absence. That means if you have, can you give me an example of a good intervening absence? Mill? Yeah, an unpaid absence. So today, if you have an unpaid absence, so what did you say? Okay, FMLA, military leave, something like that. If you have that blocked on your schedule, today you don't have the ability to build your block of HGOs around that. So you can really take a hit, those pilots that have a preloaded absence. This going forward allows you to build your 6-day block around that absence. A pilot option. Global Reserve, unavailable RDO declaration. This is for our pilots, gives them a little bit more control over their schedule. If you aren't able to get that appointment on your block of HGOs, you can declare yourself unavailable on an RDO to have that RDO rolled for a medical appointment with limited availability. You can do that up to 4 times in a rolling 12 months. You must make the declaration 7 days prior to the chief pilot's office, and you may be required to provide documentation. So, okay, limitations on on-night flying trip construction. So a few of you came up and had questions about the trip rig. So I'll give you just what this is about. And this is in trip rig construction. This is middle seat deadhead. You see a lot of penalties that we put on things, and this is not to encourage the company to build crap trips that pay even more. Also, the idea is not to deadhead in a middle seat from Boston to San Fran. That sounds terrible. The idea is to not put you into that seat, to provide some sort of financial incentive for them to not do these things. Is Kyle Oppen here? Okay, he's upstairs at the SSC main. Kyle Opp's one of our pairing leads for System Scheduling Committee, and he describes his building like a defense against this. So you can build a moat and build walls, but if you don't put a good solid roof on it, then the optimizer just goes over the wall and you get the crap trip. So that's why we have things like the long sit pay. That's to encourage them to get our flying concentrated in a shorter period of time. We also have the long duty day protection. That's to prevent against spreading what would otherwise be a productive 7-hour day of flying across 16 hours. These are all things because a computer takes all the legs and builds them in accordance with the FARs and the UPA to build the most optimized, which means dollars, for the company to weed out inefficiencies. The company doesn't like paying deadhead. They don't like paying hotels. They don't like paying per diem. They don't like paying things that don't generate money. I'm not selling their product here. If that makes sense, that's their incentive. So what we go to do is we go to attack that from a standpoint of what do our pilots want? Our pilots want quality trips. We're not afraid to show up and get our work done while we're at work. We want to maximize our time off, and whether that be at home, first of all, or on a layover secondarily, it's not in the crew room while we're waiting for our next flight. So one of the things that we look for is all night flying. It's a reality at our airline. We fly on the backside of the clock a lot. One of the things that we went after was expanding the all night flying window. That window is now expanded to 1:15 to 4:44 in the morning. That's a change from, help me, Brian, 2:20.
329.
Thank you. I lost a lot of stuff when I started doing this. Okay, 16:45 free from duty prior to an A&F. What that means is this is to prevent the day layover. You fly from New York, you land in San Diego at 9 a.m., and you're going to fly San Diego to Dulles that night at 10 p.m. Today, that's perfectly legal. Going forward, you got to have 16:45 off prior to that A&F. So that's to restrict that. This is an example trip here. You see it on here. Chicago, Seattle, at 10:15, scheduled to go out that night at 23:59 back to Houston. 12-hour, 59-minute layover. This trip would not be legal moving forward due to this limitation. Limits on duty periods following a layover of less than 16 hours following an A&F. So this is the reverse. So you fly an all-night flight from the West Coast to Boston, Newark, DC. You have a day layover. You get in at 6 a.m. and at 7 o'clock that night, you're supposed to go to Orlando and then go to Denver. Or we've seen some really long duty days in the past. The flight out to Denver, sit for 2 hours, head on up to Medford or Eugene. That's what this is to attack. This says you're limited to a 9-hour duty limit for a single segment. So this allows a transcon. What it doesn't allow is that pit stop in between. That's what that weeds out. And then a 6-hour duty limit for 2 segments. And we do cap that at 6. So if you're doing the red eye into DC, and then you're supposed to do DC, Orlando, Newark, that's okay. But you can't do the 3 legs. This all comes out of a study that we did back in 2017, 2018 with Fatigue Review Committee called DCAS, Domestic Crew Alertness Study. This is a lot of hard work and the results of pilots sitting in FSAPs and fatigue reports. So this is a great example of the system working. Things don't always work as fast as we would like them to, but the pinnacle is not just getting the company to agree to something in practice, but then we get it solidified in the contract, and that way we can use it moving forward. Basic trips are limited to 1 ANF unless there's no non-ANF flight out of the market. An example of this, sometimes Bogota will go to red eye in, red eye out. There may be Caribbean or other stations that they do red eye in, red eye out, and that's the only way to do things. In those cases, the company may need to deadhead the pilot out on one leg or leave them there on a longer layover to take care of this. Okay. Okay, number of duty periods within a trip. Such trips shall not be constructed to have more duty periods than number of days in the trip. These trips are awful. I'll try and get you an example, but okay, yeah. 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 This is the kind of garbage that the optimizer puts out, and this is a contractual provision that prevents that. So here's an example here. San Fran, Denver gets in at 8:40 in the morning, and then you get good rest at the Denver Airport Hotel, and then you fly back out that night. Everyone knows that's not how our bodies are built, but to the optimizer, this is a great use of resources. So let's push it back on that. Okay, trip mix for 737 and the 320. Basic trip mix by fleet and seat for 73, 320, and any future fleet. This establishes, our SSC pairings team went to work on this. It establishes a minimum expectation for the trip mix: 1 day, 2 day, 4 day trips. Obviously, you frequently see limits on the 4 day trips, no more than, and no less than the 1 and 2 day trips. FAR extension ad pay. FAR extension ad pay going forward. So here's a situation if, especially for our global pilots, we see this. The phone rings on the layover. Everyone says don't answer your phone because only bad things happen when you answer your phone. And this is very complex. I was just hoping that wasn't me. Hey, Paul. So this is very complex. A lot of our pilots struggle with being able to make this calculation. But the idea is if the company is calling me to give me a rest reset, then it must be because they are trying to take money out of my pocket from the extension ad pay. I can tell you from 10 years of working on the floor, you way overestimate their capabilities. They are struggling to cover flights. More often than not, the reason for the rest reset is you will not be legal to depart. It's that plane is not coming home. Always try to tell pilots, especially a multi-pilot crew, talk to your fellow pilots because you never know what's going on. You may be after the ad pay and things like that, but there may be somebody else. Just let's be unified and talk about what's going on, look after each other on this. But the real question here is, it's supposed to be a fitness for duty question. What we've worked to eliminate is, the company calls it the moral ambiguity. We just call it the ability to not worry anymore. You will be paid for your extension based on the original report time. So accepting a soft start, if your original report time was 9 a.m. in London, and a soft start is going to have you starting at 11 a.m. and you go, they're doing that to get me out of the 5 hours extension ad pay. Going forward, it doesn't matter. If you'd be entitled to extension ad pay based on your original report time, you're going to get it. So that's the idea there. Pilot accepting a soft start will be paid the same extension pay as a pilot refuses it, even if the soft start pilot does not require an extension. Overtime pay for extension. We haven't gotten into overtime pay yet, so bear with me. I'm not going to give it away yet. But the idea there, overtime pay going forward is going to replace our late and day off pay. It's a pay that we're compensated for returning home late. I think most of our families don't care what we did to get home late. They just know we're late. So they don't care if you walk in and say, I flew 8 hours and deadhead, and they're like, yeah, at my house, I'm going to Target, you've got the kids. So that's what that means. But what it really establishes going forward is that our time off is valuable. And whether the company chooses to leave us just squalling in a hotel in McAllen for 30 hours, or if they fly the heck out of us, if you get home 12 hours late, you're going to be compensated fairly for that. What this does is when you're looking at taking an extension or not, they will impute the ad pay that you would be paid for getting home late. So if you are going to take an extension, and we got some good examples in the contract for you, but I'll just give you a quick one. If you would take a 2-hour extension, it means getting home 5 hours late, and you go, well, 2 hours extension, so I'm going to get 5 hours of ad pay for that. And then how many hours late did I say? 5 hours. So, oh, good. So the first 2 hours are free. The next 3 hours, you get a 1 for 3 rigs. So I'm going to get 1 hour of ad pay for that. So that extension is going to be a total of 6 hours of ad pay. They will impute a layover of 12 hours and see what time you would get home. Otherwise, if they sent you back to the hotel, otherwise known as the alternative, I'm not taking the extension, I'm going back to the hotel, how much ad pay would you get in that circumstance? And you get paid the greater of. And every example I've looked at, it's always greater if you lay over, obviously, because the clock is running. So again, it boils down the decision to what we should be thinking about, and that is our fitness for duty. Taking an extension is supposed to be about, am I fit to continue? It's very difficult when you have money hanging over here and passengers hanging over here, and it helps us get back to our tunnel vision about safety and our fitness for duty. And it eliminates that, not by saying, don't think about the money, but by saying the contract is taking care of that for you, that you are going to get paid the greater of. Okay, also, so we talked about extension ad pay in situations where you are eligible for extension ad pay. Those are unaugmented trips with 1 flight in the duty period. That's old book. The idea there is a long time ago, the MEC said we don't want pilots that are flying leg 3 on the end of a long day. We don't want that creeping in. That, yeah, we can go 30 more minutes for 5 hours of pay, and then we have a Green Bay-like incident that we had several years ago. If you have more than 1 leg in the duty period, you're not eligible for extension ad pay. However, in here, they will do a computation. If you are not eligible for extension ad pay in a situation, you'll do you're going to get home 5 hours late. You're not eligible for extension ad pay. So 5 hours late, you're going to get 1 hour of ad pay for that overtime pay. If we send you to the hotel, lay over for 12 hours, get home 14 hours late, you're going to get the ad pay for that, which is going to be greater than the 1, and you'll be paid the greater of the 2. Yeah, should be. What are you calling fatigue? Okay, crew accepting a soft start and a hard rest reset. If the entire crew accepts a soft start, 1 hour of ad pay is paid in addition to any extension ad pay. That's to every crew member. And if an entire crew accepts a hard rest reset, 2 hours of ad pay in addition to any extension ad pay. So we talk about stacking of ad pays. This is on top of those ad pays. Duty period extension following drug and alcohol testing. Today it's 15 minutes. Your duty period is extended for drug and alcohol testing. I don't know of a facility that we have that is within 15 minutes of walking off the jet. So this goes up to 30 minutes. And this is duty pay only. It's not 15 minutes of ad pay. It's just duty. But with our generous per diem increase, it's like 75 cents. So it'll buy you the bottle of water that you need on the way to drug testing. Okay, downline report times. If the company increases the downline report time to 60 minutes from 45, the ability to reduce the report time to 45 minutes if company notifies the crew prior or immediately upon arrival. This just matches today. If they increase the report time, that they can reduce if they need to. We've seen this in some of our Caribbean destinations. Is that right, Michael? Yeah, some of our Caribbean destinations, we've gone to a 60-minute report just because it's not possible to get from the curb to the jet and get everything you need, plus going through Banana Republic Customs. Okay, minimum daily average. So I think Adrian kind of touched on this. This is the M5D, the 5 hours and 15 minutes of pay per day. There are a number of things that you should not say in the crew room. We talked about some of these yesterday. That I think, I feel, I believe, I know. This should. I like say something if I say that today. I think I've weeded all that out of my vocabulary, but because we're the fact team, right? So there are facts that we can say. This is one of them here. Because of going from 5 hours a day to 515, pilots at United Airlines will have more days off in a bid period. It's just math. So if the cap is 90 hours today, how many days of flying can you be assigned? Well, 90 divided by 5 is, yes, 18. Perfect. Can you get 18 times 515 and stay under 90 going forward? No, it's a mathematical impossibility. What do they do with that extra day? It's a day off. So that's one thing that you can be certain of. And even Oklahoma public education, I get that one. So there's that. Okay, so a minimum calendar day credit. So this is, some people will call this dead day pay. Let's not call it that, not because it means has like a bad name in it or something. It's not actually what it is. It's not that you have to be completely off on that day. It's a plug. So I told a few of you on the break, a lot of times we think about these as those 30 hours that you spend in Rochester, Buffalo, Syracuse, McAllen, those places. This is the plug there to compensate you for that time. We want the company to build us efficient trips. So if they schedule you for a 4-day trip and only give you 3 days worth of flying, and you sit somewhere on that dead day, let's try and quit saying that, but that's an empty day of flying or less than 2.5 hours of pay, they're going to pay a minimum of 2.5 hours for that day of work. So this example here, so this trip is paying on a 1-for-2 rig. So trip starts on 31st in the evening, gets back in the evening on the 2nd. So there's flight time of 1529, and it's going to pay on the 1538 just by dividing the 4859 by 2 in there, do the rigs. But you see on this first day, that first day only has one leg, 58 minutes of flying. Legs 2 and 3 is where they really get their productivity out of the pilot. So 2 and 3, that's 14 hours and 31 minutes of flying plus a 58. So that's 14 hours and 1529. Somebody said it. Yeah. Okay. So that is 1529 is less than 1545, which would be the M5D for the trip. There's a number of rigs that are working in the background here. What you need to know, and we have some much better examples at the back of the contract, we'll show you that this plug comes into play and adds value to this trip. Okay. Okay, the eliminated mandatory field standby. Hold your applause. This is a big deal. Look, there are things that are a big deal that our peers have had for years, but that doesn't mean that we don't need to be celebrating them. So talk to Garth about this. We're going to try and find the last pilot that sits in voluntary field standby at United. And we may even try and like take the chair too and enshrine it. But this is, it needs to happen. Yeah. So yeah, we're going to get like a plaque and remembrance. But this is a big deal. Look, our pilots, and this is what we articulate the company, our pilots don't mind showing up for work and being productive and doing a good job. Our pilots have a problem with having their time wasted, suiting up, crossing bridges that have tolls, making the effort to get into the airport only because they can keep us on a tight leash, and that has to go away. And we were able to achieve that here. So this is a big deal to all of us. So we eliminated the mandatory field standby. We say mandatory because field standby, yes, it still exists. It's voluntary and it pays 3 hours of ad pay. If you don't want it, don't take it. But that is a possibility out there if you like, you know, the restaurant at the airport or whatever.
Line holders as well?
Yes. Yeah. But yeah, if you're a line holder and you miss being on reserve and sitting field standby, what? Reserve? Oh, okay. Sorry. 20 F1. Yeah. 20 F1 repair, you can voluntarily sit field standby as a line holder. If you, correct. But if you want to sit field standby, bid reserve, and then you can voluntarily do it. Okay. Pilots can volunteer for field standby. We talked about that. Pilots on voluntary field standby receive 3 hours of ad pay regardless of if you're used or not.
How long is the field standby?
4 hours. Same Same rule as today, 4 hours, must be scheduled to depart on a trip within 5 hours starting the field standby. Yeah, you bet. Positive space travelers with a premium seat. So this is a second rest seat for the 777 pilots today. They have the ability to that they don't have the overhead crew rest facility. So the coffin bunk right outside the flight deck, they get standard issue as one premium seat, and there's a whole set of rules in there, and as referenced, that they can have the second seat. But one of the qualifications in the current book is that they get that second premium rest seat before a non-revenue passenger to include PS0 or below. What we've had happen out there is, because the language reads as such, is a pilot with a contractual entitlement to a first class seat was getting booted out of that first class seat so that the flying crew could have their additional rest seat. And it was a conflict between crews, and oftentimes wasn't even known until after they landed. That was the really sad part. The other crew would come out and say, I had no idea they were booting you out of the seat. I wanted to boot out the catering manager, that sort of thing. The issue here is if a pilot, because we have a contractual entitlement to something, how do you rule which contractual entitlement is more important? In this situation, we say if you have a contractual entitlement to it and you're booked into that seat, that is your seat at that time. So one of the ones is like a deviating pilot is removed and the crew still doesn't get the second seat. So an example of that would be the deviating pilot is removed from the seat and then a passenger uses miles to upgrade, and the net result is not the working crew getting the seat, it's just somebody's contractual entitlement going out the window. So, make sense? Okay. Narrow body crew rest seat. Global and single augmented basic flights can be conducted single engine aircraft that have direct aisle access seat equivalent to Polaris seat today. We don't have these on narrow body aircraft yet. Sounds like the company's wanting to do this on the MAX 10. We don't do a lot of worrying and getting excited about things that are coming until we see it, but we do absolutely plan for it. So we got members of our crew rest oversight committee, CROC. They're here. Just wave, Kirk and Brian. So these guys are on the team that oversee those rest facilities to make sure that they're compliant with the FARs and the UPA. Dimensions, noise, lighting, temperature control, things of that nature. And what this says is it has to be a direct aisle access. So what's referred to as the grope over seat on the 75200, where in the middle of the night you're having to go over a sleeping passenger to get into your rest seat, or at the other half, go back over and hopefully not fall in their lap. This is an improvement to that. And these provisions do not apply to the legacy Continental 75200s in operation today. This goes forward. And that's why these guys are hard at work right now inspecting mock-ups and engineering draft drawings on the 737 MAX 10 for that reason. And I think the Neo too, right? No, not yet. Okay, maybe not. But if they're going to put this on there, they'll be sure to inspect it. Cleanup. So we covered the downgrades and inverse seniority within status. That's the current practice. The mini pack, that's just covering mini pack. You know, when I started here, they said mini pack, and I thought they were like, it was a small Pacific trip. So a mini pack, it's just a colloquial term. It's when they combine two trips under the contract, when they don't have minimum legal rest between the two trips. So you're supposed to have 12:45 off between two trips scheduled. You go down to 10:45 actual, but FAR, you can go down to 10. So you have two trips in and out of Newark. Now you got 12:45, Newark happens. Now it's 10:45. Now it's 10:15. Now they can schedule with a Newark layover in there. Continuous per diem, have to provide you the hotel, have to make sure that you're notified before you go off duty, so you're not driving home to Eastern Pennsylvania only to find out, oh yeah, we had a hotel for you and now you're fatigued. So it's codifying some of the practice language in there. And then the elimination of field standby lines. In 11 years, they never used these. And since we're getting rid of involuntary things, it's time to go.